Okay, it looks like we might be live. So I'm hoping that people have found their way to the new link. Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties. The pros and cons of a virtual launch. We're heavy on the con side right now, but we're going to head over to the other category soon.
If you're there, can you just write something in the comments just so we know that it's working? Feel free to say hello. Let Joanne know you're here.
Yeah, I can see if you guys comment. I think I'm able to see. So thanks for bearing with us. And
yay!
Oh, yay, you guys found it. Thank you. We're going to start in about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Gina, thank you.
Awesome.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So now it's starting to feel like a party, right? Like,
yeah.
Welcome to all of our homes. Joey's in the basement.
Joey's in the basement right now. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Thanks everyone for following us from one link to another.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Janice. You're logged in as Dan.
Yay.
Oh, Jessica, hi. Oh, this is a nice way to start. Look at that.
This is more like a real, more like a book launch. Like you're just seeing everyone come in the door.
Yes. Oh, Alma, hi, and thank you for your little post today. I know.
So nice. Kate had to get a drink. She was so stressed.
It wouldn't be me. It would be the other Kate, I think, who had to actually.
Yes, other Kate is definitely going to find some alcohol right now.
Yes. This is like a sympathy. This is me empathizing with the other Kate.
So. Yeah, I know. People working very hard on their end. Yes, Joey did try to figure it out. So thanks, Rach. This is so nice.
Yay. Does everyone have a copy yet?
I should have poured wine in that little break, Kate. I just have water.
You could probably run and do it now. We have 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're the guest of honor here.
We'll wait for you.
Nothing happens without.
I'll be right back.
Yeah. Whew, what a roller coaster.
Oh yeah. I really felt for Kate. I didn't even want to say anything.
I was like, none of us know how this all works. So it was just, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, when in doubt, new link. Always the best.
We start fresh.
Yeah.
A brand new day with no mistakes in it.
Exactly. And you know, it was just a dry run. We got a dry run. I got my tears out.
That's right. That was
I'm going to sound like an automaton, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So Joanne is here. She's just gone to get a little drinky because we had some technical difficulties, as you all know.
Yay.
There she is. You earned it.
Now I want some chocolate. We have a minute left. I'm like, how fast?
We have a minute.
Downstairs.
We'll just keep all leaving one at a time so we have everything we need.
This is a liquid treat. No, it's fine.
Yes. People are getting a really good, behind the scenes look at what we were doing before.
Before they were stars. Yeah. Look at all the people.
Oh, hi, Kelly. Oh, yeah, my friends are all watching together. Heather, Mish, Gina, Ashley. So nice. So nice.
All right, so.
All right. I think we're about to get started.
Yeah, we're going to start. Stay tuned.
Thanks for coming, guys. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. Do you want to sing with me? Yeah. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the launch of A Womb in the Shape of a Heart, My Story of Miscarriage and Motherhood by Joanne Gallant. I'm Whitney Moran, and I'm the managing editor at Nimbus Publishing. Before we begin, we must acknowledge the land we occupy. On the eve of the first ever National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, honoring the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit survivors of residential schools, we hold the survivors and their families and communities in our hearts. The legacy of this 7-generation trauma and its ripple effects is not something that we should only think about one day a year. I urge you to take some time tomorrow to consider the responsibility we each have to undoing this harm and to healing together. We acknowledge that right now we are coming to you from unceded and unsurrendered Mi'kmaq territory. We are uninvited guests here, and we are grateful to be here. We must take responsibility for being settlers on this land by actively unlearning, decolonizing, and embodying allyship. As I briefly mentioned, I'm the managing editor here at Nimbus, but one of the biggest honors of my career has been to be Joanne's editor on this incredible book. Joanne and I have known each other for just over 2 decades, and in that time, it's been one of the greatest joys of my life to become a close friend of hers. To know Joanne is to love her, as I'm sure everyone here can attest. And I could not be prouder of her or this book. To have lived through what Joanne has experienced, is still experiencing, and will always carry with her, is one thing. To have written about it with such care, such raw honesty, and such hope is another. It is a rare and beautiful thing to know a writer whose purpose is to use her words to help other people. Joanne Gallant has written her way through grief, and her book is a hand reaching out. It does the most important work that books can do. In asking us to bear witness, it reminds us of our own strengths, our own capacity to survive. I'm sure we're all familiar with her book by now, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, just in case. A 30-year-old pediatric nurse with dreams of motherhood, Joanne Gallant was confident that she and her partner would conceive soon after they married. It was a matter of when, not if. And yet, her first pregnancy, a set of twins, is riddled with dangerous complications that endanger her life and results in devastating loss. After emergency surgery, Joanne is diagnosed with a bicornate uterus, a rare condition also known as a heart-shaped womb. There is no cure, no pill, no surgery that can alter her fate. What is happening to her now was preordained long before her own birth. As motherhood continues to elude her, Gallant and her partner navigate the world of infertility, up until the pregnancy that results to their astonishment in the premature birth of their son. You might have heard him singing a minute ago. What follows are not the blissful pastel days of early motherhood, but months of severe postpartum anxiety and post-traumatic stress. She is sure her son will be taken from her. It is a matter of when, not if. Punctuated by moments of incredible joy as she raises her young son, A Womb in the Shape of a Heart is the intimate story of Gallant's journey through miscarriage and motherhood, holding space for the complicated paradoxes of grief and gratitude, of life and death, and the impenetrable depths of a mother's love. I'm going to introduce you to Joanne in a moment. She's going to do a short reading from the book, and then she'll be in conversation with author Kate Inglis. Following this, there'll be an opportunity for questions, and you're always welcome to put any questions in the comments, and our publicist Kate will put those up at the end. So feel free to ask questions at any time. Just know that you'll have the opportunity to have Joanne answer them later on. And then we'll be treated to a second reading after that. So let's meet our guest of honor. Joanne Gallant is a pediatric nurse and writer. She is a graduate of Mount Allison University and the University of Alberta. In 2019, she was selected by the Writers' Federation of Nova Scotia as an apprentice writer in the Alistair MacLeod Mentorship Program. She lives in Halifax, Nova Scotia with her husband and son. A Womb in the Shape of a Heart is her debut book. Please welcome Joanne Gallant.
Thank you, Whitney, for that really beautiful introduction. And thank you to everyone for finding their way over and for taking a little bit of your evening to spend it with me as we celebrate the launch of this book. So, as Whitney said, I'm going to start with a reading from my book, and it's from one of the earlier parts of the book where I'm talking about some of the expectations and sort of assumptions I had about becoming a mother before I experienced loss. And I don't think, I'm unique in that I assumed so many things were within my control until I was forced to realize otherwise. So this is me kind of coming to that realization. I grew up believing that pregnancy comes easily. For years, I took a daily birth control pill with the understanding that an unwanted pregnancy was the worst possible thing that could happen to a girl full of dreams. I wanted to be a doctor or a veterinarian in my early 20s. Or, if you spoke to 3-year-old Joanne, a checkout lady at the grocery store. I loved hearing the beep, beep, beep of the food as it passed through the red light. I would sit in the seat of the grocery cart, eating the animal crackers my mother bought to placate me, and be transfixed by the woman behind the counter. All of my goals felt so attainable until I turned 27 and tried to have a baby. Infertility was never mentioned. Issues with conception, miscarriages, faulty uteruses. These were the plot lines of movies and television shows where ultimately a couple undergoes IVF and inevitably a baby is born. No one ever told me that infertility affects 1 in 8 couples, and I lacked the insight to consider it might affect me too. And so I walked around for nearly 3 decades, assuming pregnancy would come easily to me as well. I knew what I wanted out of life, and I thought I knew how to get it. I had a plan, and I was under the illusion that my life was completely within my control. Fertility felt like a given, like something owed to me for following the rules. My try-hard attitude remains a steadfast part of my personality. I feel a sense of comfort when I can exert control over the outcome of a challenge. Big exam coming up? Study hard and get an A. Want a new job? Make connections and prepare well for the interview. I realize this is a privilege, and when faced with infertility, I would struggle to learn that some things cannot be achieved through sheer will. I expected to be a mother the way you expect the earth to keep spinning and the sun to rise each morning. It was a certainty. I was raised in a house filled with 4 children, pets, and a lot of noise. My siblings and I were cared for by my mother, who stayed at home until we were all school-aged, my father returning home each evening with a briefcase in hand. My neighborhood was mostly white, suburban, and filled with middle-class families like mine. A family meant a mom, a dad, and 2 or more children. I wasn't provided many examples that challenged this narrow view of family, and my own mirrored the fictional television shows I watched nightly, reinforcing my singular belief. I lacked the imagination, or maybe the courage, to dream of another life for myself outside the confines of the nuclear family. This desire for an embarrassingly traditional existence as a woman feels like it borders on being unfeminist. But what is feminism without the ability to choose? I longed to be a normal woman, the same normal I saw in my mother, my grandmother, and my friends' mothers. I wanted to exist as a wife, as a mother, and to have children fill my home completely. To wish for anything different felt scary and intimidating, because what if I failed at whatever else I tried to become? In my diary as a child, I wrote about becoming a writer, a veterinarian, a pediatric brain surgeon, each dream loftier than the last. But I always made sure to include mother to ensure I knew what I was most suited for. At age 7, I had names picked out for my future children, 2 boys and a girl, and I dreamt of my future family sitting beside each other on a couch like Russian nesting dolls out on display. I imagined my life unfolding like a 1950s suburban dream. I never considered that my life wouldn't go as I imagined it would, that I could fail at even the most banal of existences. I didn't know what it would mean to fail at the one thing it seemed I should be capable of achieving. So thank you, and I'll send it back to Whit.
It's really nice to hear you read this, Jo, because I heard your voice in my head this whole time working on it. But yeah, it's really, really amazing. So now I'm going to welcome author Kate Inglis, who's going to be in conversation with Joanne, and then afterwards we'll open it up to your questions. So Kate Inglis is an author living on the South Shore of Nova Scotia. In addition to children's fiction, novels, and poetry, her fourth book, Notes for the Ever Lost, A Field Guide to Grief, won the Evelyn Richardson Nonfiction Literary Award. She is also the founder of Glow in the Woods, a community for bereaved parents. Please welcome Kate Inglis.
Hi, everyone. It's such an honor to be here. And much like our first crack at the can here tonight at the launch, I was entirely weepy, but in the best way, reading Joanne's book. And it felt like such good company to me. And as someone else who has written about grief and been through, well, none of these journeys are similar, but in the same wheelhouse. That's one of the highest accolades and goals, especially as a writer, is to be that good company and to resonate with other people who need that company. So Joanne, you have done that. So this is me raising my blueberry here to you. It's a very exciting day. I had some questions here, and with the reading that you chose, I felt like you've answered it. My because I wanted to talk to you about all those assumptions we make when we're little girls, and I felt the same way. My upbringing was much the same. And it's not so much that I dreamed of being a mother, but of course I would be a mother.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of a distinction there. I wanted to be traditional, and I wasn't embarrassed about it at all. I was so excited to be a mother. And I mean, I wanted to be other things too, but your reading just tapped into so much of that so beautifully. I don't even know what else to ask my question to be like. I guess my first question is just me saying yes, all of that.
Yeah. It was never a question. It wasn't a question I ever asked myself, or that I even thought to ask myself. That's how certain it felt.
Yeah.
And so there's this big loss of identity, I guess, when things don't go as certain as we may imagine them to be. From, I can't remember a time I never assumed I would have children.
Of course.
And so it's that kind of loss of self and the real kind of deep understanding that, we may make plans, we may have plans, and, life just kind of lights us on fire sometimes.
Yes, the Buddhists have it right on that count.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how many years past are you? Like, it's been, your son is 5 or 6?
He's 4.5. He'd be very upset if I didn't add the half. So he'll be 5 on his next birthday. And so I'm, my first miscarriage happened 7 years ago, and my last one happened just about 2 years ago now.
Okay. And so when we think about sort of moving on from a big explosive event like that, because I know that's the way that it always felt to me. I didn't have a miscarriage, but I had a loss. I had twins, and one of them died at 6 weeks old and 2 months in the NICU. And just to recap for people that don't know me, and I feel like when we think about how we care for ourselves when something like that has happened, we become several different selves after something like that happens, after we get such a shock to our sense of reality and expectation out of life. So I'm wondering, how did you care for yourself? And by care for yourself, I mean physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. In that stretch of years when you were actively trying to conceive and dealing with loss, and were you really just kind of triaging day to day at that point?
Yeah, in thinking about your question, I don't think I took very good care of myself in all of those realms. I think I felt very adrift and very untethered, and I didn't feel really connected to myself. I wasn't grounded, which is kind of how I tend to feel my day to day. I feel grounded. I feel, rational. I feel all of those things. And I wasn't able to tap into any of those sides of myself in those aftermath days. And I think it took kind of multiple miscarriages for me to take stock of where I was and to realize that I really now need to focus and take care of myself. And, that whole, if I want to be the type of mother that I want to be, I have no other choice but to deal with all of the things. And I think I kind of would put my head down and just, focus on the next pregnancy, focus on the next thing. And then it came to a point where, I have no other option but to look at the things I've gone through and sit with it. And that's kind of where I think that self-care came in. And it's a painful process. It's not
Messy.
It's not comfortable. Yeah, it's messy and it's not linear and it's still happening.
And so did writing this book feel like kind of a deep dive again back into those emotions? How did you sort of care for yourself through the creative process?
I started writing it actually at kind of the intersection of where I started caring for myself and seeking help and really looking at the things I'd gone through. It kind of unlocked this desire to write about it. And so it was interesting because I wrote through the miscarriages and then I wrote after, and then I edited it, 2 years or, a year and a half after. And so it was interesting in the later parts of, the process of putting the book together that I had to go back and visit myself and sort of, acknowledge who I was in that moment. And it gave me a really good picture of how far I had come, and yet also how easily it is to kind of tap back into those emotions of where I was, 2 years, 4 years, 7 years behind. So it was interesting, and I was very cautious not to over edit myself and to overlay who I am now on top of who I was then, because I'd want to look at the person in some of the early chapters and be like, no, don't say that to yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself, or don't have those thoughts, or, and that was just who I was then. And I wasn't at the point of being able to acknowledge that I needed to care for myself until later. So it was a very, healing and cathartic and also difficult process.
I feel like the reason why it is so healing to write, whether you're an author or someone who journals, just writes for yourself, is that it forces you into the position of mothering oneself. Because I think something a lot of journalers do is you reflect back on your writing through difficult times, and you're often sort of, oh, did I really think that? And how could I not see that? And you kind of get frustrated with your younger self, and you can kind of see the traps that you have laid for yourself. You can see the self-sabotage, you can see the negative. But that to me is that beautiful, expansive moment of being the mother, the parent to oneself. That seems to me to be such a gift.
Having compassion for that person, which we're not always so good at giving ourselves that self-compassion.
Yeah, and when we do, maybe the next time we're going through a difficult phase in life, maybe we can tap into that mother for now. That's ultimately what we want to do, is cultivate that voice, not only in hindsight with compassion for the bumbling about sort of self that's in pain, but for right now when we're still bumbling,
and kind of forgiving yourself in the moment. And I think that it's a big part of it was forgiveness, and I think that's something that I continue to work on and probably will forever. And I think that you need to forgive in order to kind of accept who you are, and there's no way around it other than just time and effort.
Something that just popped into my mind. I wonder, people sometimes say, what's the book that you've written that you like the most? And my answer in that point is always, I can tell you my least favorite one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always the one that gives me the most discontent, which is usually the one I just finished, because it's hard to let go of it and let it be what it is.
Yeah.
And I just had a question in mind. Oh, here it is. Yes. So now that your book is out, you can't touch it anymore. You
I
can't
know.
edit it. You can't fiddle with it. You can't fix anything. What do you feel like you might have liked to explore a little deeper? What do you feel like you didn't write about, like you might want to? Or is there already something in the book that makes you think, I wonder if I'm going to feel differently about that in the future? Because I have that certainly with my book on grief, that I have this probably unfair desire to go back and rewrite it because I've changed.
Yeah.
And the way that I carry the grief has changed, but at the same time, I honor what I was. But I'm wondering what if you had the chance to write the book again, God forbid, because I know you're done, you're tired at the moment of you've tapped into that well pretty deeply. But I'm just curious to know, what did we not see in this book that you would have liked to have pulled to the surface?
I think if I were to go back and write the book differently now, because I certainly started it 4 years ago, and I kind of like, it takes a long time to kind of get a book out there. And so the book ends when my son is 3. And even in the span of that last year and a half, how different I feel about things. And I would love to add some chapters at the end to show a fuller evolution of myself. But that may be wishful thinking, because I feel like then I could just say that forever until the day I die, I guess. And just seeing that evolution of who I am today. I don't always identify with the person that I am in the book currently. And I know that doesn't make a lot of sense, but kind of talking about splitting of the self, I'm very different than who I was even a year ago, even 6 months ago, even 4 months ago. And so I would love to kind of have a little bit more reflection at the end on some more sort of higher thoughts that I have about grief and the experience, and just living with it, because I was still very much in it. And you're always in it, but I was really in it when I finished it. And so some of the thoughts that you have in that space, as evolved as they feel at the time, they're kind of filled with a lot of intense feelings. And once you have a little bit of space from those feelings, you might then understand it a little bit better. And so I guess, I would have liked to have added some parts at the end that are more true to how I feel and how I speak about things today.
So if you can imagine yourself right now in that parent mode, in that mother mode, what is something that you would say today that is kind of a declaration about life, or reflection on you, on grief, that you may have not had the capacity to say a year ago or 2 years ago when you finished the book?
I think it would be about really just forgiving, even the person I am today, forgiving the person I was yesterday, forgiving myself for, that little voice in your head that says, why aren't you over this by now? And why is this still a thing? And that is a daily practice. And it's not something that I will one day, feel, oh, okay, now I've forgiven myself for all of these things. I have to continually to do that, and to reflect on the things that I wish I had done differently, or that I would do differently today, or how I would feel about things. But forgiving myself for being in those spaces as a person I was then. And that kind of is as a lifelong kind of journey that I have to face, as far as, dealing with pain and grief, and just looking back and saying, it's okay to have been that person there. And I don't think that when I sort of ended the book, I was in a place of really being able to do that. Certainly not real time, certainly not for the self I was at the time either.
Absolutely. Sorry, there was just a note popping up there. Just checking on time. So there's a couple of things. I'm going to bring it up here. I had grabbed a couple of really beautiful passages that I found to be still stuff that I grapple with, that really has a lot to do with the before and after. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to quickly pull them out here.
Sure.
When you say the physical scars from my first miscarriage are mostly gone unless you know exactly what to look for. The pain of losing those babies feels like it should have killed me, like a cartoon anvil landing on my head. But I stand, wobbling back into my previous form, and it appears to most like nothing had ever happened. That is something, I think about how we used to grieve in great mounds and folds and enveloped in black. I remember thinking about the old ways. Yeah, somehow in my head, it was always Victorian. It was always something bustle and a veil and very kind of Gothic.
Birdcage, yeah.
Yeah. And I had sort of an odd envy of the olden days, so to speak, of grief, because I wanted to be marked. I wanted people to know and to give me a wide berth. That's an interesting little parallel there of speech. And I think it must be that much more painful in the sense that when it's a miscarriage and people, perhaps the world didn't even know you were pregnant. So you don't get the kid gloves that maybe you wish you had, and you feel so different. And so you have sort of difference and short straws kind of pushed upon you time and time and time again. But the world still treats you exactly the same.
Yeah.
How did you how did you react to that kind of in your imagination and in rationalizing that the world was not going to kind of acknowledge what you were going through, and that people, as I used to say, people just keep running for the bus like it matters?
Right. There's this kind of alternate world that you enter when you're in a space of early grief, that you're looking around and you're wondering how people are moving at regular speed and caring about things that you feel are so inconsequential, but you cared about the day before too, but don't you know my baby is gone and I'm no longer pregnant, and this is something I longed for. And I think that there's an additional kind of erasure of the miscarriage because, our society doesn't like to acknowledge pregnancy before 12 weeks. And so it's really difficult to exist. I kind of felt like it was this black hole that I got sucked into, that, nobody could see me because that timing of pregnancy is just not really considered pregnancy. And so then what does that mean for how I feel? I almost felt like I didn't have the right to be as sad as I was, because there's this unacknowledgement of what a miscarriage actually is. And I can only speak to my experience, and I know that people have varying degrees of feelings about it, but for me, it was something I deeply felt and grieved intensely. And so I struggled because even I had a hard time saying the word miscarriage. I used to say, I was pregnant, and I'm not, if someone asked me what was wrong. I couldn't even say the word out loud. And I think it's because we're really uncomfortable with the images and the thoughts that word conjures. And it's things that we're told not to think about and told not to share. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I really just kind of felt like I was, drifting. And I read a book called An Exact Replica of a Figment of My Imagination by Elizabeth McCracken. And she talks about how after the birth of her first child, she wished she had a card that she could give out to people. And it said, "My baby died." And I related to that so intensely. I just wanted a little business card. This is what happened. It was too difficult to talk about, but then sometimes I would just blurt it out and leave people kind of not know what to do with that information.
Yeah, I've done the same.
So I just wanted that little card to hand out.
In my mind, before even reading Elizabeth McCracken's book, my envisioning of it was a little lapel pin.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Just like,
Yeah.
this is what's going on. I know you can't see that, but this is, be gentle.
Yeah. Or a giant organza and taffeta Victorian
Black.
with a veil. And yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Big theatrical grief is, that's how it felt on the inside. And sometimes I wish
Yeah.
that's what I could embody on the outside.
Yeah.
There's another bit here that I really loved that I can remember from, obviously I had twins. And so
Mhm.
my son who survived often asked about his birth. And when
Mhm.
2 or 3 years old, he's asking in such an innocent way. And there's a bit here in the book where you say, I tell Teddy how he needed a spaceship to get bigger and how he spent weeks underneath bright purple lights. He asks about the mask he had to wear, wanting to hear how he was a superhero without a cape. I tell him how we sang to him, cuddled him, and that the second best day of our lives was the day we got to bring him home. The version I tell him is full of poetry. That's really beautiful. And I think it's an interesting and thankfully uncommon task as a mother to
Mhm.
have to sort of come up with an alternate, kinder story to tell our children
Yeah.
who survive the NICU, who survive prematurity, or who
Mhm.
survive after so much loss and in the midst of so much wanting. And again, I feel like none of my notes that I wrote down are
Mhm.
questions, but it's more just me saying,
Yeah.
yes, I did the same. I did the same thing.
And it was important to me to have that day be joyful, for him, because it is a joyful day.
Yeah.
And it's also a scary day that we endured. And, the weeks that followed were, up and down and, the chaos of life in NICU. But I want him to grow up with the image of, him being a superhero and riding in a spaceship and not thinking about, the bookended parents just with worried looks on their faces for, 18 hours a day. So
Yeah.
it was really important to me to kind of shape that day for the half of, like, it was that way. And it's also this other thing. But for him, I really want it to be this joyous occasion. And, in mothering him and going back to your comment about mothering yourself, it helps me see the day um, much more like purely, I guess. And I'm able to see the whole well-rounded, the fear, but it does alter the day for me in a really beautiful way because I get to see it kind of reflected in his eyes and he repeats the story back. And every time you hear a story or you think of a memory, where you are, how you're feeling in that moment kind of gets imprinted onto that memory. So now when I pull back all of those memories, the really scary and fearful and stressful and anxious feelings that I had are getting a little bit more faded. And the other sides that are reflected for my son are a lot more bright and prominent. So that's been a really wonderful kind of side effect of being able to tell him the story that way.
That is so wonderful. It's just beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got one more question, a very quick one, and then we're going to wrap up and go to the reading and
Okay.
hopefully some questions. How do you feel like now that you've written a book about grief? Do you feel like now, like I felt like I was on even unsteadier ground because
Yeah.
you're supposed to be enlightened. You're supposed to have it all tied up with a neat bow before you deign to
Hmm.
write about it from any position of authority. What are your thoughts? And the book is out today. You're going to see it on the shelves. You're going to see it in people's homes, and people are going to be dog-earing it and dragging it person and getting dribbles of tea and coffee and wine on it. It was just makes it but what would you say to yourself as that mother figure from 10 years out, 15 years out, even a year out, to just pat yourself on the shoulder a little, acknowledging that kind of weird fraudulence that all authors have when a book comes out, but especially a book about grief and loss and living life with gusto, because it's hard sometimes to get up and do that every day. So what would that future wise, softened sage woman tell you about this moment today?
Well, I think sitting here in that moment, you kind of speak to all the feelings that I have. Like, who am I to write a book about such an enlightened thing? And when I still struggle with it daily, you know, that thought of, you know, shouldn't I be over this by now? And I wrote a whole book about this. I should really be over this. I should really have all the answers. But I think, you know, speaking to that future self, I would probably say, you know, it brings up more questions than answers. And with questions comes curiosity. And I think that, you know, looking back on your life and looking back at who you were now, there's never going to be a moment where I have it all figured out. All I can do is ask more questions. And so I think this book isn't, you know, me handing everyone the answers as far as, you know, this is how I went through, this is how I got through, this is how you can get through, or that I'm even through it, I'm still going to be in it. This is my thing to live with. And so I think it just would be a conversation to say, you know, you asked the right questions at the time with the information that you had, and now look at all the answers that you're getting that are bringing up more questions and just discovering more about yourself. And but it's funny that you say the fraudulence of writing a book like this, because I think, you know, Whitney and I had those conversations quite often about how I feel about writing a book and writing this book. It feels like, you know, a heavy topic, and a like there's almost this arrogance that I feel like I must have to have written a book about this, but I don't feel arrogant in my life about it. I just felt very drawn to exploring how I was feeling.
Well, you did it absolutely stunningly and gracefully, and with just the right balance of sort of raw authenticity and imagination. And it was wonderful. And congratulations. I'm thrilled.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for being here and for your book. That was, you know, very impactful to me at the time. So before we go to the questions, I'm going to read from the chapter of my book, which was, you know, the chapter that I enjoyed writing the most. And it's about Teddy's first birthday. And I kind of wanted to end on this note because it's a little bit more joyful, a little bit more hopeful. And that's how I feel that tonight is, a little bit more hopeful than yesterday was. So, and this is just kind of before I put Teddy to bed on his birthday. I rocked Teddy for longer than normal that night, letting him linger on my breast, watching him drift to sleep. In all the years of trying to have a child, I didn't realize what a treasured day our son's birthday would become. This day is more important than the day I discovered I was pregnant, crying tears of hope and fear for the life that was now within me. It is bigger than the day we discovered Teddy was still alive, despite the blood that came. When we saw his heartbeat flicker and his tiny limbs wave, instead of a still image and the words, "I'm sorry," being spoken aloud. The day Teddy arrives safely to Earth, crying with the intensity of being alive, brings tears of gratitude to my eyes. It makes me want to drop to my knees and kiss the earth for allowing me the gift of bearing this child. It balances the grief I hold for the babies I lost with the joy of mothering my son. It is when I feel the intensity of love for the child in my arms, as if I'm holding him for the first time all over again. When the nurse placed my 3-pound baby onto my chest, and I became speechless, overcome with emotion that he had somehow survived, that he is here. I place Teddy into his crib, stroking his head, and I whisper, "I'm so glad you're here." Before leaving, I grab his baby book from the shelf in his room. Tucking it under my arm, I close the door softly and retreat to my bed where I write about the day, blending my detailed account of what we did with the emotions retained from the year before. You smelled like heaven, I write, unable to separate the 2 days from each other. If I were to have been given 100 babies to choose from, I would choose you every single time. I cannot unwind the love I have for my toddler with the love I had for my newborn son. They are the same, knitted together tightly, strengthening with time. I am unable to separate the boy I kissed goodnight from the baby I carried inside. He is both. The baby I longed for, the child I have. I am so glad you are here. So on that note, I am very glad that all of you are here as well. And if you have questions, you can pop them into the chat. I am going to start. I did get a couple of questions when I'd sent out a little note on social media the other day. So I think I'll start with a couple of those, and then feel free to write in the comment section if you have anything else. So I got a question that said, did you work on the book while working as a nurse and being a mom? If so, how? So yes, I did. I worked on this book while I was working as a nurse, and I worked on it pretty much from the time Teddy was 2 until, this past summer when he was 4. I made really good use of nap times. I think I'm a person that is more productive if I have a short period of time to get things done than I've had days and days that stretched out. I would probably get the same amount of stuff done. And I also had a really supportive husband who, gave me time to write on weekends and take little writing retreats and join writing groups in my spare time. So a lot of balance, a lot of dishes left on the countertop to dedicate the time to write it. So thanks, Brianna, for that question. The other question I had was, at what point did you know you wanted to write this book? And I maybe answered that earlier, but I think I'd always known I wanted to write a book, and I always wrote. I just didn't write with the intention of it turning into anything. And it was really when I started working on myself and looking at the things that I needed to do to feel better and to, address the things that I was experiencing. And it was kind of at that point that I started kind of unlocking all of these things in my mind that I really decided I wanted to write it. And I felt that there was a conversation that was taking place kind of around the world of people, publishing more books on this and having articles and people talking about miscarriage and loss and in ways that I hadn't come across. And so that was kind of the point that I decided I'm going to try to make this a book. All right, so I see a question that popped up here. Was grieving something you could do with your husband, or did you grieve separately? Oh, that's a wonderful question. So, Joey and I experienced the events together, but we had very different perspectives of that event. He was able to kind of compartmentalize, and he kind of kept things together while I kind of just unraveled. And so we were able to grieve in the ways that we needed to, and we were able to give each other the space to have those moments. But certainly I leaned on him a lot in those early days, and I was lucky that, our relationship was strong and we were able to navigate that territory together, because it is really difficult. And there were certainly times that I wished we had the same reaction to things, but now I'm just really grateful that we went through them together. And I don't want to say we're out on the other side, but we're still going through it together. And we've kind of aligned ourselves a lot more than we did in the past. So that was a great question. Not sure if there are any other ones. Oh, do you ever think of writing fiction? That's a great question too. Yes, I always thought I would write a novel before I wrote a memoir, and I remember writing in my diary years ago, and it was like, oh, I would love to write something, but I have nothing to write about, and I kind of think, oh, be careful what you wish for. So I always thought I would write a novel, but every time I sat down to write, this story kept coming out, and versions of me, this was right before I started writing this book, versions of me would come out in the novel. And so it felt like I needed to get this book out, this story out of the way to kind of make space for all the other things that can come. And so I'm working on a novel right now. I don't know what it will turn into, but it's something that's really new to me, and it feels very freeing after being in the space of my memoir, because I don't have to stick to the facts of what happened. I can really explore all these other realms that I couldn't really explore with this book. So I'm very excited to be doing something different. Oh, Patty, thank you very much. I'm very sorry about that experience, and thank you for coming tonight and for joining me, because I found such comfort from others. I read so much during my miscarriages, and I connected so deeply to the thoughts and feelings that those writers shared. So I'm sending you so much love, and thanks for coming tonight. Not sure if we have any other questions. I'll pop over to Kate. You know what? I have one other question from social media. That was, who is your favorite author to read? And I have so many. Not surprisingly, I read a lot of stories about grief and loss, and I'm really drawn to authors that do a really good job with that. And I'll read anything by Beth Pounding or Maggie O'Farrell. They do such a brilliant job. Elizabeth McCracken, Emma Donahue, who just wrote The Pull of the Stars. She's a really beautiful writer that I always go to. And recently, Charlotte McConaughey, she wrote Migrations and Once There Were Wolves. I think I'm getting the title wrong, but those are just some of the authors. I could spend the whole evening talking about other writers. So I think that looks like that's all the questions. So thank you all for coming tonight. I'm so happy you joined me, and thank you to Kate from Nimbus, who was working really hard on the technical side of things and for making this work over on this new link. Thank you to Whitney for your beautiful intro, and for all the years of friendship and support, and being the person that kind of got me through the process of writing this book. Thank you to Kate Inglis for agreeing to come on and have a conversation with me. Kate has unknowingly and knowingly now provided me so much comfort just by being so open and vulnerable and sharing so much of herself with me. And thank you all for being here, and for joining me, and for supporting me. I feel very loved and embraced by all of you. So I'm seeing all your little comments here, and so yeah, thank you very much. I guess this is it. Have a good night.